Round, round, get around, I get around, woo. Yeah, that's my best Beach Boys impression.
You know what? I was thinking of starting off with the song, but I just thought that you would do it naturally anyways. So
yeah, I do that.
We're totally mentally in sync.
There is a Beach Boys biopic we could talk about of sorts.
There is, and we probably will.
We probably will talk about that on
most definitely. If there's any episode that we need to sing in, I think it would be this one.
Yeah, but I don't like to spike the mics. I don't.
That is true.
I'm trying to be quiet. I'm trying to be on good behavior.
These are hot mics, as they say.
Yes, they're very hot. And if you don't know anything, this is Cinema Discovery Project. If you've never listened to us before, I am Stephen Billings, and with me, as always, is Mr. Andrew Cabral. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. We are in the last week of May. We are in the midst of the summer movie season. The weather is heating up, so are the movies that we're seeing at the theaters are heating up. And today we are going to be discussing something that is a very fiery passion in both of our lives. There's a lot of heat metaphors coming at you.
Yeah.
We are going to be talking about musical biopics or musical biopics or...
don't say it like that. It's
that.
biopics.
I know.
Biopics.
It's biopics. That's the way I...
Don't do that.
I call it biopics.
But the reason we're doing it is because we got the new Elton John Rocketman come out this week.
Yes, we do. We have Rocketman is out there. Yeah. And for those of you who know Elton John's music, you understand why the movie's titled Rocketman. One of his most famous songs amongst a litany of famous songs. I mean, his music.
What's your favorite Elton John song?
Oh.
It's tough.
Oh, Tiny Dancer. It's Tiny Dancer.
That's pretty close for me. I really like Your Song. Is kind of one. It's one of my favorites.
It's pretty good. Well, I like Tiny Dancer so much because of that scene in Almost Famous when they start spontaneously singing Tiny Dancer. And ironically,
Tony Danza? Is it Tony Danza?
I don't know. It could be Tony Danza.
I think it's Tony Danza.
And ironically, one time I was at the dentist, having a cavity filled. Yeah. They play music to calm you down because nothing says, I'm getting my teeth drilled like light rock and roll. So they had he was
little Kenny G.
Elton John playing
little Kenny G as Garth hears when he's getting his dental work done.
And all them. And Tiny Dancer was playing while they were drilling the hole in my tooth to fill in the cavity.
Nice.
And I'm like, oh.
I feel like that would make you not like the song.
I guess so, but maybe it was comforting in the moment.
I guess.
Felt like I was in a movie scene, a really disturbed movie scene.
Whatever works for you, man.
Whatever works for you. But before we get into our discussion about musical biopics, just some recent news that is apropos for us cinephiles out there.
Yeah, it's kind of what we do here at the beginning of the show. We like to talk about some recent events.
Right, and the biggest event recently is the 2019 Cannes Film Festival recently happened and wrapped up. And there was, of course, a lot of, really great films that were that premiered there, that were shown there. There are, people from all over the world when it comes to publications went there to watch, all these movies. Those lucky people in the south of France.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of press on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood from Quentin Tarantino.
Yes,
a lot of press on that, but it did not win the major award.
I don't even know if it was in competition.
Was it not?
I do not know. Because I think there's only a set number of films that are in competition, or get to be in competition, if you will. I don't even know, the number, because I didn't do the proper research for this. But it was an interesting festival because it was the first time, I believe, ever that the Palme d'Or winner was a film from Korea.
Cool.
And it was from the Korean director Bong Joon-ho, or Jun Bong-ho. People may know him most prominently for doing such films as Snowpiercer, also doing the movie Okja, which coincidentally came out 2 years ago at Cannes, and it was probably the movie that started this whole Cannes and Netflix
Yeah.
fight and controversy and all that kind of stuff, because international cinema has different, I don't know, standards or different views of the way movies should be seen. French cinema being kind of snooty and whatnot. Every movie has to have a theatrical release. Every movie's gonna be.
Well, I mean, that's still definitely a thing that certain people are fighting in the U.S. too. Of course, Spielberg is very much still a very big advocate of watching things in the theaters.
The irony of that is that he ended up signing like a multi-gajillion-dollar deal with Apple, and Apple's like producing their own streaming content now, of which he's going to participate in. Yeah. And I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah, the thing is he kind of, I know, I've heard that he's kind of come back on his statements in that, it's not that he has a problem with what Netflix does. It's just that he thinks, it's about the award more than it's about the product. Right. He doesn't think that they should be in the category of being nominated for Academy Awards because of how their product is presented. Not anything to do with what it is. It doesn't mean that he doesn't think that what they do is good. It's just that he thinks that if they don't show it in theaters, they shouldn't be allowed to get an Academy Award for something. And that's
he's trying to preserve the theatrical experience.
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be sometimes there has to be lines made. To an extent, I agree with him. Sometimes there needs to be lines made. You can't things shouldn't just be given to everybody. Opportunities shouldn't always be given to everybody. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's my opinion. I mean, some people think that everybody should be able to do whatever the fuck they want, but that's how the world we live in. Everybody gets all offended when somebody tells them no or doesn't let them do what they want, and that's America for you.
That is true. The film that ended up winning is called Parasite, which I've seen the trailer for. It looks very, very good. Bong Joon-ho also did the films. He did the film Mother, which is really good. He also did the film The Host, which is a kind of a horror monster.
Which Mother, don't confuse
movie.
Mother with the Darren Aronofsky.
No, yeah,
Mother,
not that movie.
With exclamation point.
This is not Mother with an exclamation point. It's just Mother with non-exclamation point. But it's a really dark movie. Other films that played there, like you said, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Tarantino's new film got apparently a 6-minute standing ovation at the end of it.
Oh, apparently that happens a lot there, so it ain't that big of a deal. They're either like over the moon about something, or they're notorious for booing movies as well. Yeah, I'm sure. So basically, the movie's probably pretty good, but then again, it is Tarantino, and
Well, he was there. He was there.
Yeah, of course, he was there.
DiCaprio and Brad Pitt. These are like gigantic people within the movie world. And I mean specifically DiCaprio and Brad Pitt. Like their influence and their careers expand like beyond them just being actors in movies.
Oh yeah, they're big producers. They're producers now. Yeah,
they're producers now. Yeah, they're producers, big time. Another Parasite also won for Best Screenplay, which is very interesting. Best Director was actually given to a French filmmaker, Céline Sciamma, for a movie that was called Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Great title. Mm-hmm. Great title for a movie.
It's a cool, yeah.
That is a great title. What also was there, which I thought was very interesting, and I didn't expect to see this at a Cannes Film Festival ever, was Sylvester Stallone was there for like a career retrospective. And he was also promoting Rambo 5.
Okay.
Last Blood. I saw that. I saw that specifically because apparently they showed a trailer, and the trailer leaked online.
Yeah.
So I saw that, and I thought that was very interesting how, of all places, Cannes would be celebrating Sylvester Stallone's career, because his films haven't been, Cannes has a sense of prestige with it, I guess. But Rocky has been his kind of most prominent movie. That's the one everyone keeps going back to. I mean, we did our podcast episode on the Rocky franchise and how, important and how integral it's been to a lot of people's lives. So it's very interesting to see him getting kind of a career retrospective, because he's been in the business now since the 70s, which is like 40 some odd years, 50 years ago.
Well, he's definitely he's definitely, the thing is we forget, because he's such a big star, that he kind of was a self-made, guy. I mean, he didn't know anybody. He just took chances and became very popular. And of course, yeah, he stayed popular with two of his big franchises, Rambo and Rocky. But I mean, he's still a guy that is still relevant and is continued to. Hopefully he does some more directing, and not directing himself, maybe directing something else. But
a couple of other films that really popped that were in the news. Robert Eggers' film, The Lighthouse.
I can't wait to see this.
A lot of buzz.
Can't wait to see it.
It's supposed to be coming out, I'm assuming, later this year. I can't wait to see that. I've heard great things from it. Pedro Almodovar had a new movie called Pain and Glory, which I hear Antonio Banderas is fantastic in it. He and Antonio Banderas have a great working relationship that goes all the way back to the 1980s with Tie Me Up, Tie Me Down.
Yeah.
Actually, was it Tie Me Up, Tie Me Down?
I think so.
Or was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty sure
maybe
that's
it wasn't. But yeah, those are some films I'm definitely looking forward to. Yeah, so I guess we'll move on from there. We'll get into our main topic. Yeah, our main topic.
I guess.
Musical biopics.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Unless you, I had another thing to talk about, but we can just go right into musical biopics.
All right.
Yeah, so I mean, we like to kind of give a little historical perspective with musical biopics, but I was telling Steven earlier, it was kind of tough to find a sense of origin with musical biopics because they've been a part of cinema history now for a long time, for at least in the mainstream for at least 50 years, going all the way back to I think 1970, because I think before then we had, of course, other films based off of musical artists. Yankee Doodle Dandy, which came out in the 40s, which was about George M. Cohan. There was another film that was starring the great Cary Grant, which was another film. I'm gonna look up the date for it because I knew it was another one that was in the 40s. A lot of these started to pop up in the 40s, which is really interesting to me because there were also I was looking at kind of the history of biopics in general, trying to figure out, which ones of these are musical biopics, which ones of these are not. The movie I'm talking about with Cary Grant is Night and Day, where he played Cole Porter. And what is interesting is I found that the first movie that was about a musical person was about Beethoven. Was about, and it was really early on. Like we're talking about the early 1900s. So we're talking deep in the silent era, which is also interesting to me because how would one do a movie in the silent era about a musical artist? Because it doesn't quite work that way. You know what I mean? The earliest one it's actually one before that. It's called The Story of here it is. Origin of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. The subject is Ludwig van Beethoven. 1909. That's the earliest I've seen. That is very, very early. Well,
definitely, it's definitely not the traditional, what we know today.
No.
And I was we were talking about this off mic about where could we say there's really a true origin of what we see today, and I think it just begins with musicals in general, like movies, any kind of movie about music, from that time, from early cinema, like for instance, Star is Born, because them stories are influenced by real life, so anything about somebody that starts from nothing and becomes a rising star, falls, rises again, that's kind of become the cliche.
Well, what is interesting you say that is they kind of took this idea or this concept of the rags to riches story.
Yeah.
The American dream story is rising up from nothing and getting success. And that's usually done in whatever field, whether it's musicians or athletes or, politicians,
because it's
whatever.
It's relatable. You want your subject to be relatable.
Story. Yeah, it's a generic, relatable story, and it's also a hopeful one. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, if this person can do it, so can you. You know what I mean? It has that kind of translation. I also want to say that that by the time we got to the 1970s, there were a lot of interesting people who had prominent careers in the 50s and 60s, and by that point, you could start making musical biopics about them. And what is also interesting is if you go back, and I kind of was thinking about this in my head, is musicals and musical biopics are hand in hand, because you can't have musical biopics without being able to utilize music in movies. Nothing really utilizes music in movies quite like musicals. I mean, literally.
Sure. I mean, we could have
music in every scene.
There's been, I don't know if we've ever debated it on here, but I know we've talked about it off camera before about how do you categorize a musical. I mean, I personally only say movies that are musicals when they use the music, when it's like you're breaking the fourth wall type of thing, where you're singing to the audience. I don't count, something like Almost Famous as a musical. That's not the same to me. I think that's a music. It uses music as a device in the movie, but it's not necessarily, breaking into song, breaking reality.
Yeah, and a lot of yeah, and I understand what you're saying from that. I was going to go down a different avenue, but I just want to comment on that. Is that I know what you're talking about. There's kind of a more traditional sense of musical.
Sure.
Where, the actors or the dancers or singers are looking directly at the camera. Like you said, literally breaking the fourth wall, and like they're dancing to dance. Well,
they're doing something that normal people don't do, which is literally break into song. When you're breaking into song, that to me is a musical. When you suddenly are singing at a time that people don't usually sing. Everything else is just part of the story. If you're a band, if it's a Bohemian Rhapsody, they're singing, they're a band, that's part of the story. That's what it is. That's the subject of the movie. That doesn't necessarily, I mean, it's a subjective thing. I just think that's how I, define a musical.
I feel you. And I would say a lot of the early musical biopics were about more classical forms of music.
Sure.
I was just looking quickly, like, there was a movie that was about Chopin, a movie that's about Mozart. You know what I mean? Like, there's movies about certain jazz artists and concert pianists, things like that. When you progress along in history, musical history in general, things get a lot more, I would say, interesting.
Yeah.
To me, music there's like a dividing line for music for me. It's before the British invasion and then after the British invasion.
Oh yeah.
When it comes to, I would say rock and roll specifically, but I would say music in pop culture specifically. Music being infused within our culture so much that it's now like part of our lives pretty consistently.
Yeah.
And I think the British invasion in the 60s pretty much did that. And not that there wasn't great music before then, because there was. I mean, Elvis, I believe, was before the British invasion. Blues and jazz, people like Little Richard and all that were all before, the British invasion. And of course, the different, country music artists as well and all that kind of stuff. Bluegrass, all these kind of stuff. But I'm just saying, when it comes to what we're talking about, I found the most interesting and the more complex characters are people from that British invasion era. People like, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin, onward and onward. I mean,
which none of them. It's
not a musical podcast. But I'm just saying, like, I want to see the musical biopics about those people are fascinating because of the pop culture, height around them.
Well, funny enough, none of them bands you just said really have a musical biopic about them.
I would say no, but they do have influence on other,
of course,
movies that are.
There's been documentaries,
definitely,
but
which is different, and that's something I do want to bring up, perhaps later on, because one of the biggest things I always see with biopics is that although that's not how it really happened. Oh, that didn't happen then. That's not exactly how it happened. That person didn't meet that person ever. That person's fake. And I'm like, there's a difference between documentary and there's a difference between theatrical movie.
Yeah.
And the difference is one is typically based in entirely or at least predominantly in fact, and the other one's trying to tell a story.
Yeah,
and
so they take a lot of creative license and just to make for dramatic effect to make the story more compelling. Yeah.
Yes, they do. And maybe I'll just get into that right now, is that creative license is taken liberty with so much that sometimes you'll get musical biopics and none of it in there is actually true.
Yeah.
And none of it is actually true. Or like, it's not even half and half. It's like 80-20. Like, it's real and fake. And sometimes you get great movies out of, like, creating fake content, which I guess is kind of what movies do in general anyways. Also, that's all I want to say about that. But also, but get back into the 70s. This is when I think we started getting some really good biopics. Not that we didn't get some good ones beforehand, because like I said, Yankee Doodle Dandy is an all-time classic. James Cagney, and of course there are others. But in the 70s, we got a few that I found to be really, really good. We get movies like the Buddy Holly story, which starred Gary Busey, of all people. I mean, a lot of people...
Could you see him doing that movie now?
No. Gary Busey is one of those people who is, famously erratic human being.
Yes.
Who I'm assuming has done...
Who went on to play bad guys a lot after this. Like,
he went on to play like
Lethal Weapon,
guys, and cops, and be like police officers. But he's also like famous for like his real life persona being just like a crazy man, basically, like wild hair, goofy eyes, talking nonsense, all those kind of things. But at one point, he was a great actor. At one point, he was making a movie like the Buddy Holly story. And being like nominated for awards for it. You know what I mean? For those of you who don't know, Buddy Holly was kind of like a tragic famous musician, or famous musical artist who died very young. He died in a plane crash, I believe. Yeah, he was an early rock and roll singer. And from like the early days of rock and roll, I don't know if he was quite rockabilly or something like that.
Is it like two-step, kind of?
Yeah, kind of the early, like the 50s rock and roll.
Yeah.
Which is different than, like I said, the British Invasion rock was completely changing. But the early rock was kind of like rockabilly and whatnot. It didn't have quite as hard an edge as we would get later on. But that's one that's really, really good. There's another one that's fascinating to me, and I was talking to Steven about this. There is an Elvis biopic that was directed by John Carpenter. That's a TV movie. Came out in 1979, starring Kurt Russell as Elvis.
Where did this go? Where is this movie?
And what's interesting is that it was very soon after Elvis died, like 2 years after he died, which is a really close... so these movies don't get made.
So did he? That means he made this movie like right after Halloween, didn't he?
Yeah.
Wasn't Halloween like 78?
78? Yeah. So was he working on this?
Like right after?
Soon after that.
Yeah.
Very soon after that. Also, I mean, a lot of these biopics are not quote unquote official sanctioned biopics from like whoever owns the intellectual properties of these famous artists. Sometimes don't approve of these movies, so
and that's why you don't, and that's why you can't find this movie.
Yeah, perhaps. And, and oftentimes it's not. That's the case where it's like it's not approved by the family, or they didn't go through the family or whoever owns the rights.
Yeah, and I mean, I can't really think of a lot of examples off the top of my head, but you kind of somewhat of an example we were talking about off mic was sometimes artists, directors, filmmakers will kind of do it like what they did with Nosferatu, where they'll take the story, but they'll change all of the things that connect it personally to whoever it is. Like, Nosferatu's Dracula, but they didn't use the name Dracula. They used Nosferatu, and then they switched a couple things on his looks and blah blah blah, but they still basically did Dracula.
Well, you know what movie I'm going to mention because I always mention this movie.
Yeah,
Gus Van Sant's Last Days.
Yes.
which is essentially
Kurt
a
Cobain.
Kurt Cobain movie
Yeah.
about his quote-unquote last days. And if you do any research about this movie, basically Gus Van Sant pretty much knew that he would have been sued.
Oh, yeah.
And they wouldn't have let him make a Kurt Cobain movie, so he just changed the names and changed things up and made his own Kurt Cobain movie. And it's starring Michael Pitt as Kurt Cobain, and it's just his last like couple of days of life of him just being like super like depressed, and ultimately ending up killing himself, which we all knew happened. A lot of things with these biopics, though, these musical biopics, is when they end in like a death or a tragedy or something like that, we kind of already know how these movies end. We also kind of almost always know how these movies go. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you're a big fan, you know, for Bohemian Rhapsody, if you're a big Queen fan, a big fan of Freddie Mercury, you know his life pretty well. You don't know the intimate details, but you know, like, oh yeah, this album came out this year, this album came out that year. You know, this was, you know, he was born here, he was born there. You know, things like that.
Yeah,
like
but
stuff. You know,
basically with the biopic, you would like to learn more about some of the personal details of their lives. You know, their personal lives. But everything else is just the cherry on top. You know, getting to hear the music and getting to hear the. You know.
You're almost in there to see like how do they translate it, like what do they put in, what do they take out,
what inspired them to do the music that you love so much is important to me. You know,
things like that. You know, some rock stars have lived outrageous lives,
and sometimes
to the point where you're like, how are they going to do this on screen?
And then you know sometimes there's, you know, biopic movies that are not necessarily trying to tell you a story about the rise and the fall or the rise and the continuous rise. They're not trying to do that. They're maybe just trying to maybe like you said with Last Days, capture a moment. You know, something like the recent film Blaze. Is about that like. I can't think of his name. Foley is his name.
Let me look it up because I was just thinking of that the other.
But yeah, Ethan Hawke directed it this past year, and it's about it like a kind of it's
a reimagining of the life and times of Blaze Foley, the unsung songwriting legend of the Texas outlaw music movement, and I think he was around the time of like Woody Guthrie and then like Bob Dylan, stuff like that. I'm not quite sure. Don't quote me on that.
But you know, it's more of kind of an experiential film where you're just kind of with him, and it's not necessarily following any kind of journey. It's kind of, you know, it's more mood than anything.
Right.
And you know, and of course his story doesn't really have much of a rise anyway. So.
Oh yeah,
he's an unknown person until this movie, honestly. For me,
that happens a lot. That happens a lot with the indie music scene, where these people just their careers really just don't flourish. I mean, we're going a little off track here, but you know, the Coen Brothers movie,
Inside
you know
Llewyn
what I'm
Davis.
talking about.
Inside Llewyn Davis.
Yeah, Inside Llewyn Davis is pretty much a snapshot of exactly what we're talking about. It's also kind of a culmination of like all of those artists at the time who just didn't make it. You know what I mean? That tried to make it and ultimately failed. But they are like they're either in the wrong era, they're ahead of their time or behind their times. I mean, they literally have a Bob Dylan reference in that movie where it's like, man, he came along right before Bob Dylan made what he's doing like really popular. You know what I mean? Like if he had come after Bob Dylan, people would have probably paid more attention to that character. But that's about, you know, Inside Llewyn Davis. Another movie that I saw the other night, which is a very famous musical biopic, is the Coal Miner's Daughter, which starred Sissy Spacek, and I believe her Oscar-winning role. And this is a movie about the famous country music star. I believe she was like the head of country music in Loretta Lynn. And this was a very interesting, kind of more straightforward biopic. That's what you got a lot early on, and in kind of general, for most of the time, you get kind of this straightforward biopic, and Steven has already touched a little bit on the formula, the rise and fall, the rags to riches, you know what I mean? Like, most biopics and most musical biopics kind of stick in that formula, unfortunately. And this one kind of did, but you gotta realize this movie came out in 1980 when that formula, people didn't recognize that as a formula yet. It was still brand new,
Yeah, and
it was still new.
And like I said, I was another film that kind of goes back to what I was saying about like capturing maybe just a moment, not necessarily traveling through the years of prominence, is like Nowhere Boy, about John Lennon.
I watched that the other night.
Yeah, and his early years. Yeah,
it's like John Lennon, the teenage years.
Yeah,
and it's all about him, like
his relationship with his aunt, and
and like kind of the early beginnings of his musical career.
Yeah,
the very early. That movie starred Aaron Taylor Johnson as John Lennon, young Aaron Taylor Johnson. I think he was only like 20 or 21 when he
and the director of that movie ends up being his wife in real life.
What's his wife? Yes,
she's twice his age.
Yes, she is. Age is just a number, But like you said, I mean, there hasn't been a Beatles biopic specifically.
Not specifically, no.
But
where there's other actors like playing all the Beatles characters, and it's about their prominent years.
And then you get movies where like they'll have actors playing the Beatles, or they'll have actors playing these famous people, like in the background,
like the Love Guru.
Like that, yeah.
Didn't the Love Guru have a scene where the Beatles were there?
Oh, was that Walking Hard?
No, you're right. That is Walking Hard. Yeah.
That is Walking
Hard.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah.
The Cox story, which literally makes fun of the musical biopic.
Yes.
It's a satire of it.
Yes.
And it's crazy that Bohemian Rhapsody is literally like that.
I gotta think about my whole life before I go on stage.
Yeah, like literally things like that happen. Where it's like,
well, that's part of the formula, man. Where they like to start the movie out at the end and then make you go all the way back to relive the whole leading up to that moment. And then
they do that a lot in movies.
Yeah.
Not just biopics, but in movies in general, or musical biopics. Another film that's kind of, man, we can just list off some of these great movies that
The
one
Doors.
that I'm going to mention,
The Doors?
I guess, right now. Yeah, I'm going to mention The Doors by Oliver Stone, because it's one of those movies that I mentioned that I was kind of talking about earlier, where most of it has been ridiculed as not being true, or like there have been literally people like in the Doors band who came out at the time and was like, yeah, that never happened. I think people like Ray Manzarek and all the others who were alive at the time. And for me, I'm like, yeah, you're right, but this movie's still an absolute acid trip at times, and I think that what's his name is absolutely like Val Kilmer is like magnetic as Jim Morrison from The Doors. I mean, I'm kind of slightly biased for my love of this movie because The Doors are like my third favorite band of all time.
Really?
So it's like I'm kind of blinded by it, I guess. Blinded by my love of The Doors. The Doors, man, they came around at a time, like I said, that British invasion window of like the mid to late 60s, but they were an American band, and their sound was completely different than everyone else. Like, their sound was like rock and roll, but it was psychedelic, and they used a piano bass versus a guitar bass, which you never see. And Jim Morrison just kind of like this drug addict poet, basically. Yeah. just doing all kinds of crazy
I'm gonna quote Philip Seymour Hoffman from Almost Famous. The Doors, they're a bunch of drunken buffoons. Give me the Guess Who.
Give me the Guess Who.
At least they have the courage to be drunken buffoons.
Iggy Pop.
Iggy Pop.
Don't you think it's a little early for that?
Not for
me.
Not for
me. They puts in Iggy Pop. That would be. I can't wait for the Iggy Pop biopic.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Biopic, because he's still around. He's still rocking, apparently.
Hey, another good one. Sid Nancy.
Speaking of that era, that 70s. I mean, that's that. Talk about a sound that you didn't hear at the time. Punk rock, man. Punk rock is crazy.
Yeah.
Because it's so wild and...
that one kind of stands out as kind of a different one because it doesn't necessarily have a rise and fall story necessarily. He was always on drugs through the whole movie.
Yeah. I mean, yet again, it's one of those that's just kind of like a spotlight of a specific time. because
Well, I mean, his time was so short anyway.
Yeah, but it really concentrates on the toxic relationship between Sid Vicious and Nancy Spungen. I can't remember what her name was. Let me look it up.
But yeah, I mean that one.
But that
one
was done by
that one.
Alex Cox.
It gives you a chance to see a little bit of the band, but more or less it's about them two people and their relationship more than it is about the music.
Yeah, it was Nancy Spungen. Also, I mean, Gary Oldman was playing Sid Vicious.
Oh man, it's so good.
Chloe Webb was playing Nancy. An early role from Gary Oldman, and this movie is done by Alex Cox. It came out in '86.
Yeah.
Wow, I thought it was much earlier than that, but it came out in '86, and it's just interesting to see that movie come out at that time, because the punk rock scene was kind of there in the 70s and into the 80s. But it's still around now.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, just like the kind of that era was so interesting. That British punk rock versus American punk rock, and then in America, you had like West Coast punk rock versus like East Coast punk rock.
Yeah.
Just the different sounds and the venues, man. You have to watch some. For those of you out there who don't know about punk rock or the history of punk rock, check out some documentaries about punk rock, and you just see like some of the venues are basically like abandoned warehouses and like basements and places like that.
Oh yeah,
and it's just people just going bananas. It's so crazy that you're able to harness that and turn that into some type of movie. And there've been movies about the punk rock scene. SLC Punk is one that was about the punk rock scene. It's a crazy form of music, and that's what's so interesting about the subgenre of musical biopics. Is with music, you can make it about whichever genre of music you want to. You know what I mean? It's so wide open.
But it's just about what you want the focus to be. Do you want to zero in on the main, artist that, like we were talking about before, is Bohemian Rhapsody, is it trying to be a movie about Queen, or is it trying to be a movie about Freddie Mercury?
Right.
It just depends on what you want to focus on. You got, if they ever do a movie about Bob Seger, which they probably won't, are they going to do a movie about just Bob Seger, or Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band? Who knows? I mean, yeah, I
know.
Tom Petty. Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers.
I mean, how about a movie about Black Sabbath? But is it going to be like a movie about Black Sabbath? Is it going to be a movie about Ozzy Osbourne?
See, that'd probably be Ozzy Osbourne. They'll probably focus on him mostly.
Or do you want to just do a movie about Ozzy Osbourne? I mean, like,
it's tough.
It's
tough.
It's kind of open. It's kind of open that way.
Or you get
go on.
You go. Or you go more into like about something more than that. Don't focus in so much on trying to glorify the band, the person or the music itself. Sure, it's there, but you don't have to make it the focus necessarily. You can make all the actual. Try to make a good film before you try to exploit the things that are already popular.
Yeah, that was something I was kind of leaning into a second ago, where I'm like, when it comes to just the variety of the musical genres you can use in musical biopics, you don't necessarily have to be a fan of that specific genre of music to think that the movie you're watching is good. Yeah. For example, Straight Outta Compton.
I was going to say that, yes.
Straight Outta Compton's a movie about, NWA and about the rap era in the late 80s and 90s. Maybe you're not interested in rap at all, but you watch that movie and you're like, damn, that acting's great. Damn, that story's interesting. You know what I mean? Things like that. Those things can grab you, and that's the beauty of meshing the two worlds of the music world and the movie world, because those lines get blurred, and it's not about what you like versus what you don't like. It's about, so much more than that. Yeah,
it's also, you're delving into a different part of the culture that you might not have really known about.
Right.
That's
sometimes
why
it can be informative.
It can be informative, just like you said with the punk era. There's a lot of things about that punk era that can be interesting that you might not have known about. It's
very true.
Yeah.
And sometimes there are movies, like we said, like a Bohemian Rhapsody, or like something, or like a couple of these movies I'm going to mention, where they're specifically about the life of a very interesting individual that is probably someone maybe you're a fan of, you want to know more about, or perhaps you're interested in the story. I mean, you have musical biopics about you have Walk the Line, which is about Johnny Cash. You know, you have Ray, which is about Ray Charles. You know, What's Love Got to Do with It with Tina Turner is about Tina Turner. You have, you know, Coal Miner's Daughter, I said about Loretta Lynn. You have The Temptations, which is about, you know, The Temptations. Selena, which was a movie that really started off Jennifer Lopez's career, and she's both made a career in music and movies. You have Great Balls of Fire about Jerry Lee Lewis. Have you ever seen Great Balls of Fire?
I haven't.
With Dennis Quaid as Jerry Lee Lewis came out in like the 80s or something like that. Anywho, do you remember that? You're gonna have to reel me in a second here because I'm about to go off. You remember like that era of like when you were younger and you just saw Dennis Quaid in like every other movie you watched?
I feel like it. Yeah, I mean, like he was in Parent Trap. He was in The Rookie. He was in like. Yeah, he was in Day After Tomorrow. There's
like that late 80s throughout the 90s into like the mid 2000s era of Dennis Quaid where he was in like a movie every single
I feel
movie.
like he's coming back a little bit too lately.
He's still making movies. He hasn't stopped.
He's in that dog movie. He was in that weird movie where he's like the killer. He's like lately he's just popped back up again. Like I don't know what
he just doesn't go away.
Sorry, Dennis Quaid, we love you, but I mean, what are you doing? How are you not dead yet? You've been around forever.
He has been around forever.
So, he was playing an old man that was being a baseball player in the early 2000s. Like, how is he, like, he still looks the same.
He hasn't aged a day. You've got, but reel me back in.
I'm reeling you back in, okay. Go ahead.
Reel me back in.
That's my real
sound. So there's movies like Notorious, which is about Biggie Smalls. There was that Tupac movie that came out a little while ago.
It's terrible.
Which I'll say this, not all of these are good. Now, some of these are not good.
A lot of them are actually not good.
Yes, so there are some musical biopics that are just not good. You have something like I didn't actually put this together until I was doing my research for this. The Pianist, which is a movie by
Roman Polanski,
which is about an actual musician.
Yeah.
You know, I can't pronounce that. Vladislav Zippelman? Yeah. I think that's how you pronounce it.
What's the one film, Milos Forman? Didn't he do one? Didn't he do, is it Amadeus, or is it?
Yes, Amadeus, which is a movie that I don't know if it's quite a biopic. I don't know. I saw it on some lists, and I didn't see it on others, if that makes any sense. Because it's a movie that is, of course, about, you know, the career of Mozart. Yeah. Mozart, but it's told from the point of view of Salieri, who was insanely jealous of Mozart and his rise. So
basically, people think that a lot of this is fictionalized.
Is that what it is?
I would assume that would be the argument, is that it's...
Well, maybe the argument that it's not a proper biopic because you're not seeing the life of the artist. You're kind of seeing the life of the artist through someone else's perspective.
Sure, I guess.
I guess so, but I do want to mention that Amadeus it's a movie about that Mozart. I mean, that you're all right. That it's a Best Picture winner. It's a long movie. It's a movie I haven't seen since high school. I really should have given it a rewatch, but time being what it is. There's also Love and Mercy is interesting to me just by the way it's structured, because it's not a movie necessarily about the Beach Boys, but they're in it. It's more of a movie about what's his name, Steven?
Peter something, right? In this name, I'm forgetting the name of the main singer.
So am I. I'm gonna look it up.
Scream at us, audience.
Yeah, Scream at us and the other. Love and Mercy, which of course starred Paul Dano. Paul Dano and John Cusack were in the film, and we're talking about it's Brian Wilson.
Yeah, Brian Wilson.
Yeah. I was gonna say Brian Johnson. Don't ask me why.
God, this isn't. Where's the AC/DC biopic movie?
I was gonna say that, and I'm like,
if there was gonna be a generic biopic movie, it would be about AC/DC because they only have 4 chords in their songs. Of course, the movie would be very generic too. So
what would be very interesting is their first lead singer died.
Of course, yeah, Bon Scott.
That would be interesting. to see how.
You know what they need to make. We're delving into ones we would love to see. We should wait.
Yeah, we're gonna save that for later. Though.
A little bit. We got a little bit more to talk about.
Well, like I said, Love and Mercy is about Brian Wilson, who was from the Beach Boys, and the film is structured in such a way where you see kind of his early days and his later days.
Yeah.
There's really no like life journey in there. There's no real middle ground. You kind of
it's more
put
or less
together yourself.
The later version of him is dealing with a lot of issues, and it's kind of looking back on his formative years to see the connections and stuff. And
yeah, you can make connections from the past and the present. Another movie which I haven't seen, but maybe Steven, you've seen it, and that is the movie Bird, which was directed by Clint Eastwood. And it's about Charlie Parker, starring Forrest Whitaker.
He does love his jazz.
Yes, he does love his jazz. Does jazz seem like an older generation's music?
Yeah. Unless you're Ryan Gosling from La La Land.
I do like jazz. I'm not like big into it, but I listen to it and it sounds fantastic to me. A movie that I really want to see that is fascinating to me because it's about another tragic figure. A lot of these music biopics are based off on like perhaps people who died too early. They've been trying to do a Janis Joplin biopic now for years. The movie called Control, which is about Ian Curtis from Joy Division, who died very, very young. He died, and it wasn't one of those where like his career was like in the dumps, and he felt too much pressure, so he had no place else to turn, so he committed suicide. It wasn't one of those things. Joy Division's career was just about to take off. I think he died right before they were going to do a U.S. tour, and really hit the scene big time. So that's another one that's another kind of trope you see in a lot of not only musical biopics, but maybe biopics in general. Is sometimes they tend to be downers. You know what I mean? They really like
cautionary
to
tales.
Tug at your heartstrings.
Cautionary tales.
And a lot of it is very interesting to me from a pop cultural perspective. Is that throughout that generation after generation of these musicians or these musical artists, they all seem to suffer from a lot of the same demons.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Alcoholism, drug addiction. Depression has become a big thing recently.
Yeah, very, very much setting a I don't know if it's responsible or not. Setting a certain image in people's heads of what it takes to be these types of people. That you have to have some kind of darkness to be a successful and long-lasting image in people's minds as a musician.
Well, it's also like you say, cautionary tale about the price of fame and fortune.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
There's been a lot of movies about that lately with music. Yeah,
and it's only going to be more prominent, I think, going forward with musical biopics, because we're seeing a lot of prominent musical artists from 20, 30 years ago dying now. We just saw the lead singer of oh my goodness, Chris Cornell, who just passed away.
Well, you had Amy Winehouse.
Amy Winehouse is another one who yet again someone who died too young. They did a documentary about her, but I don't know if they would. Perhaps they could do a musical biopic.
I don't know. I don't know anything about her. I don't.
I mean, watch the documentary Amy, and you kind of get the whole thing. You do get the whole thing. There's a lot of these here. There's a couple more I want to mention. I don't need to cut Steven off.
No, I was gonna say. Go ahead and do that, and let's move into what we would like to see after that.
Okay. Yeah. One that's one of my favorites, and you want to talk about unconventional musical biopics? I got one for you here.
Okay.
I'm Not There.
Yes.
Directed by Todd Haynes, which is about the life and career of Bob Dylan.
Very interesting.
Steven, you've seen it.
Yes.
Have you not?
Yes,
I've seen it a couple times. The way this movie is structured is kind of like a fever dream.
Yeah.
To a certain extent, there's no real plot when it comes to story, or you're not chronicling the life of Bob Dylan. what you're seeing is different phases of his career in life portrayed by different actors.
They're vignettes.
Or actresses in different parts.
Yeah, they're vignettes.
And they're all put together. And many different amazing actors have...
And the female you're talking about, Cate Blanchett, played him.
Yes.
Yeah.
She got nominated for an Oscar for that, I believe.
I would assume supporting.
She got best... Yeah, in a supporting role. She won the Golden Globe as well for her performance in that film. But you have... I remember if...
Like Christian Bale,
the late great
Heath Ledger,
Cate Blanchett, like we've said, Richard Gere, I want to say, maybe. Yeah, because the thing is, they never call him by his name. So if you go and look at, the IMDb credits, and you're saying, "Oh, who played Bob Dylan in this movie?" None of them are named Bob Dylan.
Yeah,
so you really don't know. It's very cryptic, but you can see the different influence. Like, you get certain moments in Bob Dylan's life, specifically, one of the more prominent moments is when, Bob Dylan went electric at the Newport Folk Festival. That's a moment that they show in the movie and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so there's I'm Not There. There's also La Vie en Rose, where Marion Cotillard played Edith Piaf. That's a really good movie. There's another older film from '76 called Bound for Glory. That is about Woody Guthrie, coincidentally, who I just mentioned. And I think Randy Quaid's in the movie. David Carradine's in the movie. That's very interesting. But there are other prominent ones that we haven't mentioned yet. Would you consider Green Book a musical biopic? Because I see it on a list here, and it's very interesting to me.
I mean, it doesn't seem to be focusing on necessarily the career. I mean, I guess that it's his, but he never became. I mean, they don't advertise the movie as that. That's what it's trying to talk about is his career in music. It's more about their friendship.
Right.
I don't know. I mean,
Okay.
I don't know.
I'm with you on that.
You don't really follow him into his early years or anything like that. You just, I don't know. I mean, it's subjective.
Yeah, that's true. What is interesting is I keep seeing 8 Mile in lists. When I was doing my research, and that movie's not really. It's loosely based on Eminem's real life, but it's not about Eminem, or is it? You've seen that movie more than
it's supposed to be about. No, it's supposed to be about his early years, and of course he plays himself.
Right. I mean, as one does, as one does.
I can't wait to play myself in a movie.
There was the movie La Bamba, which was about Richie Valens. It came out in the 80s. There was the Get On Up. For those of you who like James Brown, Get On Up. A lot of people do not like that movie.
I think it's fine.
I thought what's his name was fantastic.
Chadwick Boseman is really good. Yeah.
It's another movie that is kind of non-linear to a certain perspective. You keep getting flashes of his James Brown's childhood and how it influenced his life. It's very, very interesting. A lot of metaphors in there. I think. Is there any other ones that you're thinking of? I mean, I got one here. Behind the Candelabra, Liberace.
Yeah.
For some reason, nobody mentions that movie, and I think it's fantastic. Maybe because it was on HBO, and nobody considers HBO, they consider it like a TV movie. I don't know. Yeah.
I don't know.
I already mentioned Walk the Line, Straight Outta Compton. Okay, I'm just retreading now.
Yeah, I think we've kind of hit all the main ones.
We've hit a bunch of them.
I mean, there's other ones, obviously, but not all of them are worth mentioning.
Many of them. Many of them. But let's get into what we want to see. Now, Steven, you sound off. I've been talking too much.
I want to see the Hanson biopic.
Hell yes, it's about that time.
I know, right? It's the 90s is coming back around. Let's get Hanson in there. No,
the 90s never died.
I know, right? No, I'm just kidding. What I'd like to see when I was about to talk about earlier when you talked about Plane Crash was Leonard Skinner. Where's the Leonard Skinner? Yeah, where's the Leonard Skinner? I mean, tragic. I mean, one of the biggest bands in the world, and then half the band dies in a plane crash. And then they picked up and they continued, man.
Yeah, because then his brother take over.
Yeah. The main brother's brother. The lead singer's brother.
Yeah, isn't he called Steven Van Zandt?
Yeah, I think something like that. Yeah.
Or Stevie Van Zandt.
But they picked. They got new members and they kept going, man. I mean, that one would be an interesting one. I mean, I've always wanted to see a true Kurt Cobain movie.
Yeah,
but I don't think that's ever going to happen.
You know who you have to go through to get that movie.
Yes, Courtney Love.
It's Courtney Love, and she will not let you
because
do anything at all.
Because she had she had him murdered, and that's why.
Not even I don't even know if first. It's not only that the conspiracy theories and all that kind of speculation, but just having to show their relationship in a rather real light is probably something she's not comfortable with.
Sure, yeah.
That's something that a lot of, like I mentioned earlier, like when you go to the rights owners, that they're not comfortable with.
Yeah.
For example, they ever make a Michael Jackson biopic, how are they going to deal with all of the things and controversies around him?
Oh, we forgot about one that just came out, The Dirt.
Oh, yes, we did.
Yeah.
Talk about something that has a lot of, not controversial stuff, but 80s rock, man.
Yeah, we need a Twisted Sister biopic.
Oh, yeah. I mean, 80s rock in general, there was so much drugs, so many
Van Halen,
women, so much
Kiss,
coke.
Where's the Kiss biopic?
It was all 80s rock and roll, like the 80s hair metal was all like sex, drugs, and rock and roll, if that makes any sense.
That's it.
I mean, for me, my favorite band of all time is Guns N' Roses, so I would love a Guns N' Roses biopic. Do I think that's ever going to happen? Perhaps not.
Maybe, yeah, I don't know.
I mean, I know the band is on much better terms now. The original band members are on much better terms now. They've been touring now for years. I saw them on their reunion tour, the Not in Your Lifetime tour, which nobody ever thought they would get back together because there was such a rift between Slash and Axl Rose. But yeah, who knows? That things could happen. But another one I would want to see is I know they've done this a couple of times right now, but they haven't really done it properly, and that's Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
We know that they've done, like I said, a couple of times. What was that movie with Andre Benjamin or Andre 3000?
It was called Hendrix or Jimmy.
It was Jimmy All by My Side, wasn't it?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I think it was Jimmy All by My Side. And the problem with that movie is it depicted the early career of Jimi Hendrix. The thing is, they couldn't get the rights to any of his music.
Yeah.
The family or the people who own his music rights wouldn't let them do it because they didn't like the movie, or they didn't
believe in the project. Yeah,
they didn't like the project. So you can't do these movies without the music, because that's what kind of
gets people in the door.
These movies work. Yeah, it's kind of what makes them work, especially for somebody like Jimi Hendrix, whose music is so iconic to why we remember him. Like, every time you hear his guitar riffs, you're like, man, that's Jimi Hendrix, because nobody else sounds like that. You know what I mean? Some of these musicians are so iconic that their sound is so unique to them. You can't differentiate the two. I would love a Jimi Hendrix one. I would, like I said, Guns N' Roses. I would like.
They've bounced around the Who a lot. I've heard, like, specifically with the drummer, because didn't he die early too?
I think he did. Yeah.
What's his name? God, I'm so bad with musician names today.
Hey, you're supposed to be the music guy. Weren't you in a band?
I was in a band for a minute. I'm just I'm more of a movie guy these days.
I know. I was counting on you for all this music technology. Was it Keith Moon?
Yeah. For a while there was a Keith Moon biopic getting thrown around,
and it was. Didn't he famously explode on stage?
Well, there was like he destroyed his drum set. Yeah. He would destroy his drum set all the time. But apparently, I might be wrong about this, but for a while it was gonna be what's his name? Mike Myers was gonna make the movie.
Interesting.
And I think he was gonna play Keith Moon, but he's obviously way too old now.
Yes.
But Yeah, the Who, that British invasion, and of course like the Rolling Stones. That a lot of the bands have weird, have hardcore stories.
Yeah, Rolling Stones, Aerosmith, a lot of these iconic bands from back then. But man, the rock and roll life, not for the faint of heart. That's what I kind of meant by that whole dividing line between pre-British invasion and post-British invasion. Because post-British invasion, you get all that 70s and 80s hard rock. You get that 90s grunge era stuff. You got the alternative rock of the late 90s that came about. And it's just... but in that middle there, that 70s, 80s is where the hard rock was coming. That's when you get metal. Now, metal is crazy. Metal is... heavy metal for the 80s is kind of crazy. That's where you get Ozzy Osbourne. That's when you get Ronnie James Dio, who I was just listening to earlier. I would love a Ronnie James Dio musical biopic.
What about... Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I would say because he's kind of like one of the godfathers of metal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He created the horn symbol. The horn,
the
skull horn thing. You know what I mean? With the two fingers.
Yeah.
Which is something he actually got from his grandmother. She used to do that. That's the origin of the metal horns.
Yeah. I was gonna say, what about another big artist, Stevie Ray Vaughan?
Yeah, very tragic.
Very blues rock.
Yeah, his blues rock is crazy. That very much in line with someone like B.B. King. That would be interesting. A B.B. King story would be very interesting. He's passed a few years ago. I would love to see that come to fruition. One that's kind of near and dear to my heart is Lane Staley, the former lead singer of Alice in Chains, that would be just a complete and utter depressing. Just the way his life turned out was so depressing. The way he died completely alone, and they didn't discover his body for like a couple of days or whatnot.
I could see like Aronofsky doing.
Aronofsky would make a great one because it would just be really, really dark
and maybe a little bit like kind of like Black Swan, where it's like what's reality and what's not.
Yeah, kinda because it was yet again a lot of those people from that era. A lot of it was drug and alcohol related stuff, and that stuff leads to depression. It's very interesting, that whole grunge era. This is you're gonna have to reel me in a second, Steven, because I'm about to go off. That the music and what they were expression came from a very emotional place. You know what I mean? Like all of those songs, like you could think of Nirvana. Smells Like Teen Spring, Smells Like Teen Spirit. Very emotional stuff. All that stuff was like very expressive, and they were trying to like say things.
Sure.
And it's very interesting how, a lot of those artists who were saying very expressive things ended up dying, from like emotional casualties, suicide and drug use and from drug use and all that stuff. Someone like Scott Weiland from Stone Temple Pilots from that era as well. I would like to see his story. Would be fascinating, of kind of a rise, a fall, a rise again, and then a fall again, and then the final fall being, death. It's really tragic stuff.
That 90s era, man. There's only like one major guy left from the main group, and that's Pearl Jam, Eddie Vedder. He's the only one that survived.
Yeah, Eddie Vedder kind of made it out.
And the thing is he never was really. I don't think he ever really had a bad addiction problem. I think he might have drank a little bit back in the day, but I don't think he's ever had really any major addiction problems that I know of.
And the way things have pretty much go, I guess, for anyone's life in general, not necessarily musicians or artists or movie people, is things that happen in your personal life end up affecting your professional life.
Sure.
And then the things that affect your professional life come back and affect your personal life. It's like a circle of hell, basically. You know what I mean? And it just drives you straight down. Man.
But yeah, there's endless possibilities. We could go on forever talking about what bands would be making awesome.
You think we're gonna live long enough to see like recent biopics about recent people?
If I see a goddamn Justin Bieber movie, I might shoot myself.
Do you think we're going to get a movie like a Backstreet Boys movie or an NSYNC movie?
God, I hope not.
About the rise of boy bands.
The rise of boy bands in the early 2000s. Yeah.
What's crazy is that music's never going away.
I
I was at a wedding over the weekend, and I don't go to social events at all. I like to stay home and watch movies. But anyway, sometimes you get thrust into obligatory places, and it's just very fascinating that all of the the boy band music, the hip hop music, and the R&B music of the late '90s, and early 2000s, stuff that some people look back on and like, wow, I can't believe we listened to this. They all end up at familial celebrations, like weddings and birthday parties and family gatherings, and it's like, so that's why this music still stays alive.
I could see somebody like a Lady Gaga getting a biopic in the future, because she has a very interesting way about her, and maybe like a Britney Spears, because she had such a personal downfall for a while.
She's back down again, and if recent.
Did she cut her hair again? Did she go bald again?
I think she kind of quit, like, her residency in Vegas, I think. She kind of quit, like, her tour dates and all that stuff, and I mean, she has led a very interesting, complicated life.
Yeah.
As a lot of these artists that we've covered have.
Yeah.
And movies like to, I don't know if the word exploit is the word, but use.
They're making their money off of it, so it's not like it's
I'll say this, just the genre in general, I guess that's how we'll kind of wrap this up, is the genre, I think right now, is as strong as it's ever been. This subgenre of musical biopics, because they keep coming out with them and they keep having great success.
And I would say it's mostly because of the music, not necessarily because the movie's good.
Well,
wink, wink by Bohemian Rhapsody.
Well, yet again, that's indicative of the quality of the movie and the filmmaking and all that kind of stuff. But like you said, I mean, I don't mean to bring up Bohemian Rhapsody again for the bajillionth time, but yeah, I think it's the highest-grossing biopic of all time.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Or maybe the highest-grossing musical biopic of all time. I may be inflating those numbers, but this movie made like hundreds of millions of dollars, is that more indicative of the quality of the movie, or is it because it's about one of the most iconic people in music ever? You know what I mean? Like which one factors?
Because it includes some of the most iconic music ever, not necessarily. Yeah. I don't know that it's necessarily because it's Freddie Mercury. I think it's because it's Queen music.
Oh, but that kind of factors into Freddie Mercury as well.
Sure, I mean? But I think
separate from the quality of the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if they made a musical biopic movie about someone who was, I don't know, like not famous or whatever, like a regular, like semi-famous person, maybe.
No, nobody said Blaze Foley.
Nobody would care.
Blaze Foley. Nobody saw that movie.
That's very, very true.
But I think that's a good place to end it, man. We can go. But I'm excited to see Rocketman. I'm hearing good things. I think our friend Dan, saw it and said he really loved it.
Yeah, I do hear that Taron Egerton is really, really good as Elton John.
Yeah.
He's a really great young actor, and he's actually doing all of his own singing.
Yeah, he's singing, which is definitely a step up from Bohemian Rhapsody. I'm going to bring it up again.
Oh, here we go. But speaking, kind of coming in a roundabout way to what we were talking about earlier, at the Cannes Film Festival, they screened Rocketman, and before the screening, he had a duet with Elton John.
Yeah.
Where they sang Rocketman, and you can go on the internet and see it, and it's really, really good.
Awesome.
Like, he's fantastic. He's been going around with Elton John doing promos for the movies, and they've been singing together, and it's really something to see. So with that being said, we will wrap it up here.
Cool. Where can you be found, Andrew?
You can find me on Twitter at Cabzilla06, as well as my YouTube channel, Cabzilla Productions.
And you can find me on Facebook, Stephen Billings. You can also find, I haven't been posting a lot lately, but Instagram, Cinema Discovery Project, I post all the goodies I buy. And also you can find this show on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, iTunes. That will be it for this episode of the Cinema Discovery Project. I think we're gonna usually we're bi-weekly, but we're gonna come back next week with our next spotlight so we can get ourselves on a new schedule. So look out for that next week, and hey, keep on watching them movies.
I know I will.